Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for our book club, 2,000 years ago. And this is a little bit different because I'm actually recording this little bit at the end of our session, because here's what I realized. I don't think we did a great job doing a summary for you. So in 2 minutes or less, here's my quick summary and my renaming of the chapter before you enjoy this hour of our book club. Chapter 10, final chapter in section 1 of the book. I renamed this chapter for us. You know how I love doing that, but I renamed it Pure Hatred Meets Pure Love. And that is because this chapter is full of examples of sort of the worst that society has to offer and the best that society and heaven has to offer. The chapter starts with us looking for the son of Publius Lentulus, the little boy who has been missing. And we find out that there is a reward, and Semele tells Andre, the two of them, remember, conspired to kidnap this child. She tells him there's a reward, and in return, Andre kills her. He poisons her. She dies, and with her, the truth about where this child is being hidden. The chapter moves forward. We learn that Publius Lentulus goes on a series of trips, and while he is gone, our good friend Pontius Pilate continues to make advances on Livia. And now Sulpicius joins and makes advances on Anna. The two of them, not feeling safe, go to Samaria to be with Simeon, who you remember, the chapter is called The Apostle of Samaria. That is referring to Simeon. Simeon, who is a just beautiful soul, continues to share the gospel of Jesus, to share the stories that he has learned, and in the process of protecting Anna and Livia, who go to see him to be safe, he gets murdered by Sulpicius. Every moment of that, bearing witness to Jesus, bearing witness to the goodness of love, and upon his death, in his final moments, as Sulpicius kills him, Sulpicius, the cross on which he is killed, actually hits Sulpicius in the head. Horrible moment, but guess what? Livia comes through, and in this moment of complete chaos, kind of wrangles the troops, says a beautiful prayer, and with that, Simeon is buried, and the chapter sort of ends with the women going back home, and there we are. Publius Lentulus and Livia still have conflict. 10 years pass by the time we get to the next chapter, but enjoy the chapter. That was a little longer than I expected, but thanks for joining us and have a good one. Hi, everyone. This is our book study for 2,000 years ago, and I am Nicole Assisi. You're probably missing Daniel's handsome face. He might be joining us a little bit later, but there's another handsome face that usually joins us. That's Alex. And together we're going to be discussing chapter 10 of the first section of the book. I've got my trusted hard copy of the book with my fancy markers on here. Daniel is our usual digital reader, and we don't have him, so we get to actually talk actual book pages in our good real book. If you've joined us before, you know that we start with a little summary of the chapter. We go through and talk about some quotes. We have some discussions. And if you are joining us live, you can chime in anytime with questions and comments. If you're watching this on YouTube or connecting through social media, you can always leave us some comments, engage with us that way, and we really like hearing from you. So chapter 10, before we actually hit the record button for this session, Alex and I were talking about that this is a really big chapter.
Yep.
And while usually one of us gives a summary, we're going to tag team this summary a little bit to make sure that you're getting a full overview of what's happening. Yeah. And Alex has volunteered to be our victim to start the summary. So,
all right.
Alex, take it away. What's happening in chapter 10 in section 1 of the book?
So, like we were talking about, so we ended chapter 9 with that horrible meeting between Publius and Flavia. So, and the chapter starts really on the next day, and says that next day Publius started going out looking for his son, and he has like going through his head that he's really troubled by all the things that are happening, and he decides to go on a big trip to find his son, and in his head, because he has this like, now he did not like the governor from the start, right? But now with the Flavia story and everything, all that he thinks that is going on, he really decided to go and find something to get, to make a case to Caesar to strip him from his powers. So,
and let me remind folks, in case they don't remember who that is, we're talking specifically about Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
And there have been rumors of indecent acts between Pontius Pilate and our beloved Livia. And if you've joined us, Team Livia all the way. But they are all lies and rumors, though unfortunately some things happened that didn't look good, but nothing has happened. And I wanted to make sure that folks who weren't caught up with their reading, Alex, knew that. So sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, that's totally fine. And with that part that you're saying, that those rumors are spread by Sulpicius and Livia, right? Livia? Right.
Flavia. No, wait.
Livia. Flavia is Publius' wife. By Livia. Livia is she's married with Publius' uncle, right? And this chapter, you got right? I got right?
Her name's not Livia, because Livia is Team Livia, my hero.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Mary.
Flavia, I just... So you're correct.
But is Flavia the daughter? Flavia is the daughter. And so what is the evil woman's name? By the way, perfect example of how we're really, truly doing this real time with you, and how I wish some of you screaming at your YouTube channel right now.
A lot because he knows all the names.
He knows all the people, but you know what? I wrote them down on the inside of my book. So let's see if it's here. Flavia is the 7-year-old girl. Livia is the wife of Publius Lentulus. Their son Marcus has been kidnapped by Semele, I think is her name. That's how I say it, at least. Semele and Andre. And something happens between Andre and Semele in this chapter, so stay tuned. But the rumors are being spread by Sulpicius and by Pontius Pilate's wife, who nobody seems to remember her name, but she's evil. So can we agree that we can just call her Pontius Pilate's wife, and if we don't find it in the next couple of seconds?
Wife. It's the uncle's wife. Remember?
That's right. It's Pontius Pilate's sister-in-law.
In this chapter, Publius is trying to get rid of her and his uncle, to asking Flaminius to take him back to the Rome to get her far away from him, because she was the one that took Publius to see Livia coming out of the meeting with the governor at the time that Jesus was going to be executed in the cross, right?
Yes, you are absolutely right.
So this chapter, he's getting this plan on his head to how he's gonna get those people away from him. So he go to this trip and leave Flavia and Livia behind. And
With
this,
Anna, the servant.
yeah, with Anna and the servants. And this is a mistake by his part that we're gonna see in the chapter 2, because this is gonna again things happen. Sulpicius find out that she's alone, go talk to the governor, and then we have a big another big moment in the book because of that trip that Publius decided to do alone, going through the cities to check on the work of the governor and to look for his son. So,
Yes.
and then we have another big moment between Andre, the kidnapper, with the aide or
his
the
assistant. Yeah, the woman who helped him, who used to be the caretaker of Marcus. I sometimes wish I had like a whiteboard right behind me, or like something animated over here. Maybe Daniel can figure out right here where my hand is how to like line up all the people. 2 children, Flavia and Marcus. Flavia used to have leprosy. She was cured by Jesus.
Yes.
And right as Flavia gets better, little Marcus is kidnapped by Andre. Yeah. You remember Andre because in the very early chapters, I think it was chapter 2, when Publius Lentulus leaves Rome to come to Galilee, there's a boy who throws a stone, who is punished, or we think throws a stone, who is punished for that action.
Yeah.
And is then
his father
taken into custody. His father is Andre, and in to sort of right that wrong, or to get revenge, Andre kidnaps Publius Lentulus's little baby son. Yeah. And helping with that is the caretaker Semele. So in this chapter, we start out by Publius Lentulus leaving. Yeah. And then we cut to a scene where Semele is at Andre's house and tells him, like, hey, guess what? There is a reward. And if somebody finds this baby, there's a reward. Andre gets really worried because Andre says on page 167, Semele, you could have continued to live were it not for this damned reward. It has condemned you to death. And so what does he do? He poisons her. Yeah,
and it's because it's not a small amount, right? You're talking about big money here.
And, money.
Yeah, and in this conversation with Semele, he find out that her dream is to get a new house or a house to live with her future husband, something like that.
Yes.
And then on his head is like, she's gonna betray me because of the money, and he decides to poison her. Right?
Horrible.
So, and we have something that when I was reading, I was like, she's gonna tell, right? Because right at the end, she got like, she's on her last breath. She's trying to say that she's like, what's the part? So let's see.
Page 168. Anna, said the dying woman, her voice fading. I'm dying, but my conscience is heavy, troubled. And we're biting our nails, waiting for her to say something, and then she dies.
And then,
so the mystery of where baby Marcus is dies with her.
Yeah. And we know that because Emmanuel says that in the book, right? That
Yes, indeed.
in this, I think in the same page, I think, where it is. And it's at the end of the page. Andrea Figiora's secret was enshrouded in the thick darkness of the tomb. So we're not going to find out soon about that. So let's see how
All right.
things are going to unfold. But this is going, and we know when we get to the end, we know that we're going to have like a big jump here. So yeah. But we got to this part, and this is when they still like trying to search for Marcus, right, in the city or close by. And then Publius go back to the house to let Livia know of his plan. And she even get a little bit like hope to talk with him, right? Because he's going to talk to her about the trip and everything. And then when she thinks that he's like okay to listen to her and decide to speak out, he just leaves and talk to my hand, go away, right? So, and again, he lost a moment that maybe they could work things out. And when I because we read this book, like, and we know that this is not fiction. And I think about Emmanuel going through this again to write the book. And he like, probably in his mind is like, I lost another opportunity to get right? Make things right again, because he always say that when he's talking about himself, like he always say that what is it? He's always saying that how his pride is only his way and the way that he sees things, and like
indeed,
it's really hurt to read and think that you're, because when we look at our lives and the small mistakes that we do compared to what he's doing, it's like it's hard. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
meanwhile, knowing that he is leaving, right? Knowing that the house will be without Publius, Sulpicius, who works for Pontius Pilate, tells Pontius Pilate, like, hey, the woman you like is going to be home alone. Husband's traveling. You should go visit her. And he says, and I kind of like her servant, so we should go together. And the sort of objectification of them is really quite gross. But when Sulpicius gets to the house, he tells Anna, no, it's not Sulpicius, it's Comenius, another servant, right, who goes to the house and says, like, hey, this is the plan. Here is what the lictor wants to say. Here's what Sulpicius is coming for. And poor Anna it says on page 176, extremely pale when she finished listening.
Because he goes
of the insulting intentions.
Yeah, because it's funny, because in his mind he really thinks that first Livia has an affair with the governor. He thinks that for sure. So he decides to go first to let her know that the governor is going to be coming to the city. But for his surprise, he first talked to Anna. He asked for Anna to ask for Livia, right? And then he says a lot of things to Anna that make she pale. She's pale, right? That's the part that you are right now. And then
Yeah.
when Livia comes to talk to him, he says that about the pilot is coming to see her. She just like the part says like Livia's eyes blazed with justified indignation, while numerous thoughts assault her mind. Gathering her energies, she had the courage to deliver a response in keeping with the circumstance. Mr. Lichter, I thank you for your kind words. However, I must inform you of the fact that my husband is traveling at this time, and we are receiving no one at our home in his absence. So
Yeah.
just kind of like shut the door and say like, you can go. I'm not gonna see or talk to anyone. And he
Yeah.
got me by surprise then because he really thought that she has something going on with the governor at the time.
Yeah. And then Livia tells Anna what happened, and the two of them are really worried about their safety, right?
Yeah.
It's, you know, it says on page 179, my conscience is telling me to safeguard my little daughter from the evil snare. So not only is she afraid for what might happen to Anna, what might happen to herself, but also what might happen to little Flavia.
Yeah.
And so Anna has a great idea. She, on the bottom of page 179, she says, I have a plan, said Anna hopefully. If you would agree to it, we could leave with the little girl and take refuge in Samaria of Judea, in the house of Simeon, whose respectable age would protect us from any danger. You'll remember Simeon in earlier chapters was the gentleman that went to go see Jesus. He's a humble man, lives in a very humble home. And these two ladies are thinking, you know, we should go to Samaria, stay with Simeon so that we'll be safe. And they decide to travel really simply. So usually when Livia would travel, there was pomp and circumstance. We see in earlier chapters that there are guards, that there are servants, that there are all these things, but they decide that will not be the case. They're going to travel quite simply.
And this is why, and we did not talk to this yet, about the title of the chapter, right?
Yes.
The chapter said, the title is The Apostle from Samaria. That
yes.
In this case is Anna, it's uncle, right? It's her uncle, right?
Anna's uncle, correct. He's the uncle.
He's is the Apostle of Samaria. And we will know why soon, why the title says that, because at the same moment that Livia and Anna is coming up with this plan, suspicious go back to talk to the governor, right?
Yes.
Saying that, look, she doesn't want to see you, and he get upset, but he kind of decides that there's a lot of women here that I don't need to have all this trouble to go after, and kind of let it go. But suspicious is really on his mind that he needs to have Anna for in any way, and he convinces pilots to give his blessing for him to go after her, right? And then we can go back because it's go really fast, because Livia was first afraid of this plan, right? Because it's too far away to go with Flavia, and but she really have this intuition that she needs to do that, because she really feeling that if she doesn't go away, something really bad is going to happen, right?
Yes.
They decide to go. She get Anna money to get all the preparations, to get horses, or I don't know what kind of animals to travel and prepare everything. and they go, and I think from this part you will go directly to Samaria, where she meet again with Simeon, and he's really happy to have both of them there, right?
Yes, and we learn about him. It's really beautiful because he is now sharing the stories and the messages of Jesus, and he is doing so near a, in a little bench with a cross. And we know, remember from last chapter, that the cross used to be a symbol reserved for thieves and murderers, a way of sort of killing and punishing them. But the early Christians really reclaiming that symbol as a symbol of the master. And so on page 181, we learn that amidst the shady, leafy olive trees, he had erected a large, heavy, and rugged cross with large rustic table nearby at which believers could sit on simple makeshift benches to listen to his comforting words. And so the women stay there for multiple days, just listening to him, learning. And at that time, you got to remember, we did not have the written gospel. The actual stories of Jesus were passed down sort of through an oral tradition and through notes that people take. And Simeon is actually one of those many note takers. Who's trying to recall all the stories of sort of what did Jesus teach us, and he, obviously went to go see him, and so he used that same message that we often hear about to teach about what he knew of what they call the Master of Nazareth. So he's not called Christ, but really the Master of Nazareth, which is so beautiful. So the story goes on. We learn a little bit more about the stories that he teaches. He shares the gospel. There's some beautiful passages that I hope we can get back to, but for the purpose of sort of finishing our summary, we won't talk about the prayers and the different lessons that he teaches, but instead we jump ahead and people are getting worried. There's bad juju in the air. Do you want to take it from there? Why are they so worried? What's happening?
Well, this is like, I think here it's where it's that point in time that we have the gospel starting to spread, right? We have these little places like Simeon that is starting to gather and study, and the preachings is going all around. They say in the book, people were starting to feel, what's the word that I'm looking for? They do not understand where this is coming from, but they feel like inspired to talk and to preach the lessons of Jesus and talk about Jesus and the new a kingdom that he so much talk about it. And this is like going all over the place, right? And at one point during a session on Simon's house, at the end, someone like says something that like triggers Simon in a way, correct? That, I think that's what you're referring to when the guy at the end says that what is the passage here?
Are you looking at page 185?
I think that's what let me see here, 185.
Where he talks about, like, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
No,
and he's in
when the guy says, like, Simon's just finished the prayer, and see, the guy says that before we leave, let us remember that the Messiah was continually reminding his disciples of the need for vigilance and prayer, because in this world the wolves are always prowling around the flocks of sheep. So this kind of triggers in Simeon something, and he go to like a state of prayer, and he get like a vision or that something's going to happen, that his time to get to his faith really challenge is going to come soon, right? And then we know from this time that Suspicious is going to Samaria to look for Anna and Livia, right?
Correct. And we learn that, if you're following along in the book with us, around page 186. And this is where, Pontius Pilate, as you had already alluded to, Alex, saying, like, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any further need for such measures. He's saying there's plenty of women here. The governor was surprised by the women's resistance, accustomed as he was to easy conquest. Admiring Livia's noble heroism, he concluded that, after all, such obstinacy in his pursuit was unjustified. There was no lack of other tempting, beautiful women who, due to his high social standing in Palestine, wanted to win his favor. So he's basically saying, look, I can get a lot of other women.
Yeah.
Forget it. But then Sulpicius is saying, but will you please permit me to still go? I really want to go. Can you grant me the privilege of going? And that's on the top of page 186. He says, now it is my turn to humbly ask that you grant me this permission. And, Pontius Pilate must be like, okay, why are you so desperate? There's other women here. But he says, fine, go ahead and go. And so he gathers about 6 men to actually go. And so here's the crazy thing. He is going after 2 women, with essentially not a small army, but, other soldiers.
Yeah.
Saying that he's worried about who he will find in Samaria, but really it's quite bizarre. But while this is all happening, we flash back to Samaria, to Simeon's house, who is having essentially what I'm going to call, the book doesn't use this word, but I'm going to call them premonitions.
Yeah. It's intuition.
Intuitions, premonitions of sort of feeling like something bad is going to happen. I am worried. And he keeps saying, if my hour of sacrifice has come, let us be strong. And the women are getting worried at this point. And he says, dear children, never question the advice of those who have grown old in their struggle and suffering. This is a decisive day, and Jesus would not deceive my heart. So he's basically saying, hey, I am getting this intuition. I'm getting these messages that I'm supposed to keep you safe. So he hides them in a cave. And at this point, Livia and Anna are weeping at the bottom of page 189. And he says, only God knows the time that is night, and this hour may mark the final moments of our time together here on earth. If that is the case, keep this cross, and he gives her a little cross. Keep this cross as a memento from our humble servant. I express my sincere gratitude. Don't cry if my time has come. If Jesus calls some of us to his service before others, let us remember that we shall all meet again someday in the loving light of his kingdom of love and mercy, where all of the afflicted will be consoled. So it's really beautiful. And he talks to Livia truly as both a father and a servant. It's really beautiful because he says, my dear lady, please take care of Anna. I forget the exact words and I'm looking for it. But he says to Anna, as for you, Anna, love your mistress as if you were the humblest of all slaves. And to Livia, he said, let us trust in the divine providence so that you can have strength. And so he basically asked Livia to care about and care for Anna, who he cares about deeply as his niece, and for Anna to take care of Livia, really solidifying their bond. And they take his hand. So even though socially Livia is of a higher social stature, she takes his wrinkled hands and kisses them. Yeah. And it's just really, really beautiful.
Because at this point, I think both of them
know.
are really thinking that they're not going to see him anymore. Yeah.
And lo and behold, a paragraph later, Sulpicius Tarquinius arrives with the other 5 or 6 soldiers and says, old man, through some acquaintances of yours, I know that your name is Simeon, and I also know that you are lodging a noble woman from Capernaum, and together with her servant, I have come to the part of the highest authority to speak personally with those women in private. Yeah. Not so fast.
Yes. And it's interesting that because we see at this point that Simeon already got like a moral stature really high, because even suspicious sees in him someone that is like a noble aura or something that kind of block him and has an impression on him like who's this person, right? But he got like his position and what he knows, and tried to be really rude and like giving orders because he is above them. So
and then he lies, right? On page 191 he lies. He says, I am not looking to do them any harm. Let me remind you that these insulting insinuations deserve punishment of justice. And so he basically says, like, Simeon, why would you think I'm trying to harm anyone? I am this great guy. I'm just trying to solve some problems. And Simeon, I am so impressed by his steadfastness, by his faith, and by his clarity of words, because I can tell you, whenever I am confronted or in a tough situation, I don't speak this clearly. I truly wish I did, but it reminds me of, I forget the gentleman's name. He wrote the 4 Agreements, and one of them is be impeccable with your words. You know, Rodriguez, what is his name? The gentleman who wrote a great book, really worth reading. Not a Spiritist book, but a spiritual book, highly recommend it. But he says, be impeccable with your word. And I feel like Simeon is so impeccable with his word. And he, is speaking up to the lictor who has a lot of power. And he says, lictor, maybe you can fool people, but you cannot fool God with your unspeakable, impure sentiments. I know why you have come to these parts, and I lament your criminal impulsiveness. Your conscience is heavy with dishonest, impure thoughts, but every moment is an opportunity for the redemption that God grants us in his infinite goodness. So he calls them out, and then he gives them an out. He says, I know you're up to no good, but guess what? God always gives you an opportunity.
And hey, friends, it's Don Miguel Ruiz.
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Hello.
We missed you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm late.
You came just in time to help me. Me quoting other books is always dangerous. So the people that have been watching all along, Daniel, and they're watching on YouTube, so the good news is they can't out us right now. But Alex tried our darndest, and we were stumbling over names in the beginning in our summary. We'll get back to do a quick flash summary in a bit. But we're doing sort of a lengthy summary. We're halfway through the chapter, and we're at that lovely part It's not a lovely part at all.
Lovely.
So much for being
Yeah,
impeccable with
yeah,
my
but
word. Not impeccable.
it's
Yeah, but
inspired, right?
don't worry.
Because it's inspired to see how Simeon like stood up to suspicious at that point, right?
Which was beautiful. So, and the more Sulpicius pushes back, he starts shouting at him at the page on top of page 192, and Simeon, just keeps answering. He says, "I answer to a more sovereign power than yours, one that is full of mercy and goodness." And so he just keeps holding the line, holding the line,
Yeah.
holding the line.
And this is like pushing suspicious even more to get him on his rage, just going piling up. He's like, and Simeon is ready for that, right? We see that he's ready for that. And at some point, they tell the guards that it's with them, the other six, to get him to do something with him, and looks like they hit him, and they bind his hands, and at some points he's just going looking for both of them, and they like think of something to get the truth or where they are from Simeon, right?
Yeah.
And then he see the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it says, it's really beautiful. Simeon, however, was well prepared for bearing witness to his ardent and sincere faith. And speaks so much. Speaking truth to power is so hard. He says there is nothing that authorizes people to kill their brothers under this or that circumstance. And so really calling out, like, this isn't okay.
Yeah, and if I may jump in, even though I'm late,
Yep.
I think that what you guys are saying make perfect sense, because I feel like, one of the themes I see here is that Sulpicius symbolizes everything that's earthly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Simeon symbolizes the belief in the spiritual when it's fully taken hold in us. And Sulpicius, everything he's got, all the leverage that he has is earthly thinking, right? So he brings out all his parchments, all his writings, all his tools, and like he tells them to break them, right? He tries everything that would normally hurt somebody that has the earthly thinking method on, and nothing of it takes hold, right? And that's a wonderful thing. When you say about the cross, I think that's a really interesting piece, because he doesn't know what to do anymore. Like, all his threats are not working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a fundamental change from a spiritual perspective that we sort of, like, all of us go through. Like, once that awareness kicks in, like, the world does not know how to handle us, what to do with us, right?
Yeah.
They just don't have a schema to kind of work on. And then the cross is such a symbolic moment, right? That they are going to go and, like Alex was saying, and they decide that they are going to tie him up to the cross.
Yeah. And if we go back a little bit and remind that when Livia and Anna are listening to Simeon's study, he's back to the moment that the Christ was in his cross, and he narrates everything that he saw at the moment. Mm-hmm. And we are going to kind of through everything again, but this time with Simeon, not with Jesus. Yeah. That the way that the story is going to unfold right now. So,
it's interesting in this chapter, as I'm watching this, I kept thinking about all the early Christians who died bearing witness, whether it's with the gladiators, whether it's with the lions. And it's such an interesting, I often think about, like, wow, like, what it must be like to have that much faith and courage, because I think I lack both in that proportion. Because, on page 194, we hear Simeon saying, death is preferable to compromising with evil. and how beautiful that he has that much faith.
Yeah.
And, you know, knowing that, because sorry team, like, I don't think I'm there yet. I'm like, oh my gosh, what would I do? Like, how would I sell out? How many times would I sell out? Well, first of all, I wouldn't have been the one lecturing to begin with, to have all this faith. So let's just hope I wasn't one of the guards.
Yeah.
It's a great point you make, right? I mean, this is the fundamental question that all of us are asked to answer at one point in time, right? Because going back to your point, Nicole, as you think about yourself, and I thought about myself the same way, was here we are, right? Like Alex, I think, did a great job of saying that, Simeon was sort of like foreshadowing what was going to happen to him when he was remembering what Christ went through. And lo and behold, he goes through the same process that Christ goes through, right? He's put into a cross. He has all these friends who are coming to pray with him, right? Deny that they knew him, like, no. Like, we are not going to say we know you because we don't want to get in trouble either, right? And they're all made to sit there. But that seems to be like a unique theme that obviously we don't hope it materializes this way with us, but it's symbolic in the sense that whenever we embrace the spiritual teachings, like, the world turns itself against us, right? As if everybody who used to be on our side starts to kind of avoid us and deny us because they think that we are either crazy or they think that it's going to harm their social standing in any way to admit otherwise.
Yeah,
so it's
because
a question that sticks with me.
Yeah, because I think the hard part is, like, if you think, like you said, that suspicious is the earth material side of things, and when we think that we really are spirits that are going through here, the logic doesn't fit for them, because spiritual thinking, it's like it's a continuation forever, right? So we're going through this, and we are always on an ascending part. And this logic, it's really hard for someone that do not see the ways that the thing, the way that we study and we try to do, right? Because we're really trying here. And Nicole says that I don't know if I have all this strength too, but it's like it's really hard for people to understand the way that we look at things.
Yeah. But we know that there's assistance there, right? We know he doesn't suffer for naught. And as this chapter sort of winds down, we see that, Simeon sort of blinks his eyes, like tired with pain, and he's almost transported. And those are the actual words that he uses, is that, he felt transported to the delightful spot of Capernaum in the sweet moment when he prepared to receive the blessing of the Messiah.
Yeah. And there's the interesting part that the other guards that was suspicion was commanding them to inflict the pain in Simeon could not do it because they all saw a light at the top of the cross that do not let them do anything. So
good point.
And in the end, suspicion is the one that has to do everything. Like, so don't, it's like in the part, it's really, it's, when I was reading, I was like thinking about, because it's, everything went in a way that, like, you're not gonna put yourselves, other people to do what you wanted to do. So you have to take a hold on your life. So if you want to do something bad, you're not going to ask someone else to do it, and you have to do yourself. And,
and he says that he unleashed the forces of darkness as he's taking, the weapon and hitting him, and that's quite the language, right? One could say that the unleashed forces of darkness had completely taken over the soul of the lictor, who seized with convulsion, unspeakable fury, whipping the body without pity and a torrent of insults to impress the crowd that was watching. Like, he's trying to actually show off how crazy. And
I think because his rage is just piling up, because every time Simeon doesn't do anything, right? He doesn't complain. He doesn't cry.
Yeah.
He doesn't like show any kind of emotion that I think he's expecting from someone that is like being inflicted that much pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's almost cartoonish. Like, this next part is almost too good to be true, because what happened? The top of the cross struck his head in a single blow, rendering his attempt at escape useless. So essentially, his brains are bashed in by the cross. This is the crazy part. I'm like, man, if I didn't know it was a true story, I wouldn't believe it was a true story. Because, you know, here he is whipping him, and then the cross just sort of goes, and in that moment, right, like, everyone's sort of bewildered, not sure what's happening. Livia and Anna show up. And if you're following along in the book, I'm looking at page 199, where it says, you know, when Livia and Anna arrive at the door, they saw the horrendous spectacle of Simeon's body nearly reduced to shapeless pulp at the base of the cross. And then they saw Sulpicius's body stretched out a few steps away with the base of his skull crushed. You know, imagine being those two women coming out. And what does Livia do? Team Livia? She tells Anna to shape up. She's like, Anna, pull it together. You've got this. Take care of Flavia. Like, pull it together, girl. Take care of my daughter. And then she sort of steps up, and this is great because the dialogue between Livia and the soldiers is fantastic. So she sort of like takes a breath in. She asks Jesus for courage and strength. Yeah. And then it says in the book, she feels this superhuman force that takes charge of her. And she says, you know, I am only sorry that 6 men allied with the crowd allowed the consummation of this act of infamy, of supreme cowardice, which divine justice has punished right in front of you. So she actually uses fear, and it's just like turning of like momentum, right? Like, she sees exactly what's playing out, and she's like, oh, you know what? There's going to be chaos. I need to take control of this. And so she uses this, like, do you see what God has done? And Livia says to the soldiers on page 201, soldiers, none of you will leave until you bury these bodies. She's like, you know, wagging her proverbial finger at them. And they say, you know, but ma'am, like, don't you want to consult the authorities? And Livia just retorts back, certainly not. I call about the infinite mercy of Jesus to aid me. And so, obeying her orders, they placed Simeon's lifeless remains on the rustic table, and the people who had forsaken him earlier that came by, saying they didn't know him, now give grace. And Livia does this beautiful prayer. So earlier in this chapter, we haven't talked about Simeon's prayer, and now we see an equally beautiful prayer from Livia. And, you know, I'm watching time because we're almost at an hour. So finishing the summary, and then we can go wherever you two gentlemen want to go. But essentially, they bury the two gentlemen, Simeon with a lot of love, and Sulpicius kind of in a shallow grave that nobody really pays attention to. Publius is still a jerk. Like, he finally realizes that, like, his wife had not been lying to him, but he's still a total jerk about it. He's like, well, you know, but your job is still just to be a wife. And Livia at that moment is, you know, saddened that she's lost a mentor in Simeon, that her husband has still not come to her, but she receives this inspiration and message from Jesus by thought that says, "My daughter, do not expect the happiness that the world cannot give you."
Yeah.
And we finally, end the chapter.
Well, we have one thing that, so Pilate's, at the end, he knows, right? They told him what happened, and
Yeah.
he just like release a whole of a pain, inflict a lot of pain to the people in the region, because
That's right. He goes
that,
there for 35 years or something, punishes them, something crazy.
Yeah.
I forgot the amount of years.
Yeah, because he just think that they did something wrong, because suspicion was his one of his most one of the best helpers that he had, the lictor and stuff. And these all set, in the end, it says that Publius got him out from the governor, and he ends killing himself in some place that the Caesar sent him out, right?
Yeah. Yep. And this is the interesting thing, right? Because of all the evidence that Publius put together of his bad administration, he sends it back. He's got clout. There is a new emperor, so it takes a little bit of time, but they are able to, 2 years later, so in 35 AD, right? The governor of Judea, the procurator of Judea, loses his post, and he is dismissed from all the functions he had exercised in the imperial government. He's exiled to Vienna in Gaul, which is a province, right? Where he committed suicide 3 years later, afflicted by remorse, hardship, and sorrow. So he loses, Pilate loses everything. He loses power, he loses money, he loses influence, and with the regret, he commits suicide. And the family remains in the same spot, right? Still, the whole thing, just like Nicole said, with Publius refusing to budge, even though he commended his wife, like she did the right thing, but he's still too stubborn. And then we learn why, and finally why the book is separated in 2 parts, because part 2 will happen 10 years later. 10 years later.
Yeah.
That is a lot.
And it's really something, right? Because first we got like, I'm thinking about Marcus, right? Because he was a baby. Now we're gonna jump 10 years, and we got maybe like 2 years in this last 2 chapter, right? Or something like that. So he's gonna be like 12 or 11.
Like he was going to be more than that, because he was already a couple of years, so it's like 15, 16 probably.
Yeah, right. So I don't remember that part yet, but it's like it's a really big jump that we're gonna do in time here to see what's going to happen in part 2. And what I got from this first part, it's like, it's really hard to be Publius Lentulus.
Yeah, if we zoom
put.
out, right? Yeah, well put.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out, like, and just do a quick recap of part 1 on a high level, right? We have them starting in Rome with all the power and life is basically well, but their daughter is not doing well. They move mountains to try to get her to be better. So they move to Palestine, and they actually get her to be better through the healing that takes place with Jesus.
Yeah.
But Publius refuses to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Right. And because of all his personal doings, he ends up losing his son, even though he has gained his daughter back.
Yeah.
And in the process, he also managed to lose his wife, right? So he goes from having everything almost that you can possibly ask to losing everything that was really important to him, but not realizing that it's his own doing, and that he could have that done differently because he squandered the opportunity of really embracing spirituality in that pivotal moment with Jesus, which is something that does not happen with Livia, right? She makes use of all the opportunities that are presented to her. And even when given with difficult circumstances, which Publius was not, right? He was given all the ease of the world, and she was not. She handles the advances of Pilate. She deals with other people. And so she's on the up and up, personal sacrifice, and he has chosen the path of comfort. And that's a tough one.
Yes, right? That's right. That's correct. Well,
and while we don't have time to really talk about these passages, I encourage anyone and everyone watching this to read the two prayers. One offered by Livia on page 203 that starts at the top of page 203 that says, Jesus, meek and divine master, this is the glorious day when a valiant apostle of your kingdom has departed for heaven. Really worth reading, just so beautiful. And then the second prayer, really the one that comes before that, is Simeon's prayer, which starts right at the bottom of page 184. And it's just so beautiful where he kind of talks about the end of his life approaching. Both are really, really worth digging a little deeper into. But I can't let everybody leave without telling you what I renamed the chapter. Given all the pain and suffering, I called chapter 10 Pure Hatred Meets Pure Love, because I feel like it's such an amazing juxtaposition of ultimate love and sacrifice and belief, sort of the best that the world has to offer. Daniel, I think, sort of dubbed it as like everything that is right and spiritual, sort of the spiritual side, with this very like basal hatred, from the murdering of Semele to the, Publius is like denying his wife, to the advances by Sulpicius on Anna, by, the murder of Simeon, so on and so forth. All the ugliness combined with the pure love, Simeon's love, Anna's love of her mistress and the service, the love of Livia for Simeon, and the love of Livia really for her husband, who, Daniel, if you were acting like this, I would have wrung your neck 5 times over already. So
this is beyond couch level for sure. And I think that your summation is really great, Nicole. And the way that I would put your title into perspective is just like you're saying, as part of her prayer. Towards the second part of her prayer, there is a piece that I think really kind of exemplifies her mindset. And she's praying, and then it goes, she paused briefly, and then she continued, "Oh Jesus, to you who came into this world for those who are desperate for salvation, uplifting the sickest and most unfortunate, we also pray for the criminal who did not hesitate to trample the laws of fraternity and love by torturing an innocent man," right? It goes back to the pure love piece. She has learned so much that she's not only praying for Simeon, but she's praying for Sulpicius, because she has understood the spiritual piece and saying, you know what, Simeon's going to be okay. He's done amazing. Who really needs help here is the aggressor. And how often do we do that? How often are we able to step outside our earthly thinking and think spiritually and saying, oh my goodness, the guy who's really suffering here, who's really in trouble, right? Almost like a spin-off. We could come up with a different book and a different story of what happened to Sulpicius in his next life, right? Which is not going to be pretty either. But she shows the love and the love that Christ has for all people. So that's a great way to, in my mind, to kind of think about how do we grow outside our own mindset and our own thinking, to also consider others.
That's true. Okay, I think we finished part 1.
It's a wrap.
Yeah.
Again, awesome. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave us some comments, share it on social media. We love hearing from you. Thank you to everybody who's been following our journey. Even if you're not totally caught up with the book and there's a session coming up, dial in, join us, have fun. Clearly, Alex and I proved today that we do need you all watching. Daniel, we need you as well. But all the people watching, join us. We'd love to have you. Thanks for being here with us.
And next week, Nicole, are we doing chapters 1 and 2?
Next week, I believe we're doing chapters 1 and 2 of part 2.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, it's dense, but we can do it, team. We've got this.
We got this. And we are 50%
And look at me going.
wrong.
I am already marking
Yep.
my book and my chapters. Here we go. These 2 is what we're reading next time.
Yep. All right. Talk to you guys next week. Thank you for letting me be a part.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Guys, bye-bye.
Bye.
Good
Have a good night.